Hello again and welcome to part 2 of the Mosaic Coffee Morning session with Chris Marston, Chief Executive of LawNet. In this session, we cover the working practices in the new normal and how collaboration between members within the law firm network benefits them all.
We've seen some innovative ways of meeting client demand, in the very early weeks of the pandemic. It seems like ages ago now. Remember when people were having wills signed leaning out of car windows?
Yes.
Yeah. And all of that. And our firms were making diary notes to go back and revisit that as soon as circumstances
While you're talking about claims, and it's not necessarily a claim, but I was talking to a lawyer the other week, talking about the effect of COVID and the end of lockdown. And it did make me stop and think that I'm now going back to face-to-face meetings. What's the situation is if you go to a client meeting and you happen to have COVID and you then infect that client and then that client then infects other people, are you personally liable? I don't see it as a personal and professional indemnity claim, but is there a potential claim?
I think you need to talk to a lawyer to get an answer to that, but it's
insurance law messy. My initial thoughts on that, without having thought about it, are around whether you had put in place suitable precautions is going to be the answer. So if it was, you put your fee earner who had a temperature of 104 and was coughing wildly in a small room, 97-year-old client, yes, that looks stupid. If we've all been to offices now where you go in and they take your temperature and there's hand sanitizer and everything's in place, then if you show that you've taken reasonable precautions and your policies were right, I think you'd probably be okay, but it will depend on the circumstances.
I bet there'll be some claims like out there like that. Probably law firms setting themselves up to make those claims.
I think you can be absolutely sure that somebody's going to jump on that bandwagon. And I can probably guess what their postcodes might be. We for a long time had a range of preferred suppliers and member benefits. When we look at the combined turnover of the network, it's about 350 million. So when we talk to people who supply the sector, we're generally able to negotiate some sort of discount for our members. And we introduced a brand new service in May of this year, the first week in May, I think it was. We'd never had it before. We'd never needed it before. And it's suddenly become our number 2 service out of a range of 70 preferred suppliers. And that's the provision of office PPE.
Right.
So, members were understandably nervous about, where do I get this stuff from? Are they reliable? Are they the kind of people the government's been dealing with? God help us all. Will they deliver on time? Are they trustworthy? Are they going to go bust next week? And it's a big thing to search the market. So we were able to do a little bit of research, find somebody who would meet their needs for things like rubber gloves, signage, hand sanitizers, desk dividers, screens, all that kind of stuff. And it absolutely took off. So I'm really comfortable that our firms have done sensible things to manage the return to the office.
That's really a good example of the sort of thing LawNet does for its members on the PPE side. Do you want to give us a couple of other examples of the sort of thing you've been doing for members over the last 6 months?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing I should say is we reduced their membership fees. They were all looking down the barrel of some financial uncertainty, and we decided that for 3 months we would reduce their fees by 50%, and subsequently we've reduced them for another 3 months by 33%. We don't have a profit motive, we don't have shareholders, and what we've tended to do we've been around for 30 years, and for the past 20 or so of those, the small excess or surplus that we make each year has been squirreled away, and we quite simply took the view that that money is better used, because it belongs to members, it is their money ultimately, it's better used supporting them through these challenges than it is sitting in our bank account. In the early days, when it was all about cash, we wanted to help them with forecasting, understanding cash flow. Barry was part of that. he ran a very well attended cash flow workshop for our members, and we wheeled in Andrew Allen from PKF Francis Clark. Many of you will know. He was and his firm were very helpful with information on government grants, access to schemes from the banks. My own role as head of professions at Lloyd's before I came to LawNet was helpful, because I was able to get in touch with the opposite numbers that I knew in various other banks, and to get their personal commitment to supporting their own banks, law firms through the difficulties, and to get involved personally if anybody were to get declined. Yeah. We gave them some support in areas like compliance, doing that from home. Tracy Calvert worked with us on that, and she's extremely knowledgeable, as you all know, in that area. Mental health and well-being. It's a challenge, you know, when you're working with your laptop on an ironing board and you're trying to homeschool kids and all that kind of thing. And we had a great session from Nick Blois. He did a really good session on keeping your people engaged, keeping them happy, keeping them involved, and looking out for them, I suppose, really. And, you know, you pick up some practical stuff, don't you? We all Zoom all the time these days. If I were to talk to one of my team about how they're feeling, it's an old-fashioned phone call, because it feels different. It's a more intimate conversation. I don't think we'd ever say that about a phone call, but it is. And create an online program. And my goodness, who'd have known? Because our members have been telling us up to that point that it would be impossible, that people wouldn't do it. Well, we ran 45 learning events from April to July. We had about 1,500 attendees. So it's been an eye-opener for us. The biggest contribution we can make is the ways that we give our firms the opportunity, the people in our firms, the opportunity to learn from each other. And that's what that article in Solicitors Journal was about. It was simply about what good people got together on a Zoom call and shared openly with each other that they would not and could not with their local competition, and how it's led all of them to understand what an opportunity this pandemic has given them. Many of them will be working differently for a long time. They've changed mindsets in many cases. There were people who believed that if you ask people to work at home, they'll just be skiving. Well, far from the truth. In many cases, I think managers need to be careful that people aren't working too much at home.
So whether without that face-to-face supervision, or possibly even, you know, the popping your head into the next door office to go, what do you think about that? Which is easy to do, whether there will be more errors coming through.
I'm not so sure about that, Mark. I'm thinking the head round the door. To an extent, I do it with you, and I think you do it with me. And you can do that on Zoom. I think what's more difficult is not even supervising, training, having new or inexperienced trainees who would normally be sitting with a fee earner and learning by osmosis by sitting with a more senior colleague. Those are the ones who I think are really losing out, because they're just not getting that experience and that learning experience.
And I think the other big thing is, you know, we have to quote Peter Drucker in every one of these, don't we, in terms of culture, eat strategy for breakfast. It's how do you maintain your corporate culture when everybody is remote? And I think that's going to be an interesting issue for a lot of organizations if they continue with this.
I think it's recognizing that challenge, Mark, that has seen so many of my client firms go back to work. I would say the majority of the client firms I'm working with are, I won't say not fully back in the office, but predominantly back in the office. It's firms in central London and other big city centres that are having the difficulty, where understandably staff that are reliant on public transport are a bit less keen to return to the office. But I think you're right. It's not just maintaining that culture, but it's one of the ties that binds you to an organisation. You know, what's the principal reason people leave organisations? The people. What's the principal reason people stay? The people.
We've discussed this at length on our weekly leaders calls, and taking those issues one at a time. With supervision, curiously, the feedback we've had from quite a lot of our firms is that because working remotely made them think hard about how they would do it effectively, many of them feel they're actually now doing it better than they used to in the office, because it's more structured and there's a greater alertness or awareness of the need. So that's interesting. I agree with the comment about people who are training. I think that's really hard. And what we've heard from firms is that they're trying to get those people into offices. If ever there's a group that needs that kind of osmosis, it's them. And so I think there are other ways of maintaining culture. In our little team, you know, we just got 8 people and we're all at home sitting in front of one of these backgrounds. You know, we do go in from time to time, and if I'm going in to do something you know, we got a rota for running the taps so we don't all die of Legionnaire's disease. And if I'm going in, I might see if anybody else fancies popping in to have a game of table tennis with me, if they can make it. So, yeah, I'm sure there are practical things. Our members seem to be telling us that they see a mix of working in office and other and remote working in the future. They see the office as a hub that you visit a couple of times a week. And when you're having an office day, it's not even necessarily going to be a 9 to 5 office day, but you will spend some time there, catch up with some people, and do that personal interaction that humans need and thrive on.
It's certainly what I've noticed, having got so used to Zoom and Teams, going back to face-to-face meetings. They are so much more effective than having virtual meetings like this. It really hit me like a sledgehammer how much more effective they were. And I'm sure, yeah, we'll still be using this, but I'm sure we'll be going back to quite a lot of face-to-face meetings.
And Howard, less tiring face-to-face.
Far less tiring. Far less tiring.
Interestingly, some of the secondary lenders have piled into the CBILS market and are looking at propositions that have actually been turned down by the main clearing banks, which I found rather surprising.
Well, as a recovering banker, that doesn't surprise me. You know, what I'll say is that all lenders have a different lending appetite. And whilst now might not be the time to change banks, I think some businesses throughout the economy might decide to review that situation in clearer times after all this is behind us. If I say one last thing, it would simply be that what law firms have learnt in adapting to this pandemic should be seen as an opportunity to shape their business better for the future. And I'm pleased to see evidence of that happening in our network.
This brings us to the end of our second and last session with Chris Marston, Chief Executive of LawNet. Thank you for watching. Watch out for part 3 of our session with Bob Spence on all things virtual marketing.
It doesn't make you nostalgic for your banking days, Chris?
Not remotely. It's nice to have an honest job after 40 years of banking.